executive producer. So how did you come to this film? How did it come to you? How did you get involved?
Well, I had done a film called Unbranded many years ago, and so the producer of that film sent me this film. And I mentioned last night I was in the middle of directing the Dog Doc, and of course I had no intention of taking on another film, but when I started watching it, I couldn't stop watching it. It was a rough cut of this, so some similar, but not as good as this. And so and you know what? I actually sent it to a friend of mine. I'm one of the few people that know she was sexually abused as a child. You know, it's something most people won't ever discuss. So I sent it to her because I had no reference of this type of thing in my life, thankfully. And she called me back, and she's a tough businesswoman. I mean, she's smart, sharp, everything. No one would ever suspect what had happened to her. And she called me bawling. And she said, Cindy, this film hits every note. You have to do it. And so I jumped on board.
And what were they asking you to do? Since there was a rough cut already, what was the next thing for you to do as an executive producer?
You know, they had been working on it for about 5 years, and they kind of were at a standstill. They had run out of money. They kind of thought it was finished. And they did more nature films that came out of Montana. This whole group lives in Montana. And they really didn't know what to do with a feature film doc as far as our world of feature film docs and competitions and festivals. So what I did is I just brought it home. I had them come to New York. We did a screening with a lot of editors and people, and we all kind of jumped on board as what they needed to beef up. We got a composer, you know, because you want original music, which Todd Griffin did this score, which I think is phenomenal. And there's a lot of pieces, you know, to make a feature film to get it out there. You know, a lot of people make films, but then they can sit there. They can, which this one was just going to languish, I have a feeling. And I thought it was such an important topic and an important film, and it was so approachable because the director had lived it. So yeah, I just kind of came in and stirred the pot, and we got it going.
Right.
You know?
And you say, so Sasha is a film director in general? I mean, he's part of an outfit in Montana that makes films to begin with?
He was in his early 20s, and he was just working kind of in production assistant. He had never directed a film. This is his first film. And he just turned 30. So, you know, he said, I felt like I couldn't go on with my life, like I was trying to move on, and he had come from Pennsylvania, moved to Montana, and was really just trying to get into the film business. But this lingered in his soul, and he felt like he couldn't move on with his life unless he told the story.
Well, it was from a storytelling point of view, it was brilliantly done in terms of the way that it got structured, with starting with all the, you know, because he had all the tape and all the film
right.
from his father and so forth in the background, and so you said yesterday when we were talking about this film, when we were talking about the Dog Doc, and you said that it unwinds like, not necessarily a thriller, but like a feature film, not a documentary in some ways, because there are elements, there's suggestions of what's going to happen. There's this sort of foreshadowing, and then there's elements brought in. The very key line in the beginning is when his father says, I was looking at these things, and when I went back to look at them again, I realized there was stuff going on in the background that I hadn't seen before, and we get the idea, okay, this is this unspooling. And so I guess that that Sasha, by going back to revisit this and having all the film and then the modern stuff that's shot as he's sort of re-examining everything, he structured it that way. When you got this rough cut, it was set up that way.
Yes.
But I noticed the score was elemental, as well as the audio. Was the audio as tight as it is here? Because there are elements of that where there's echoes of certain musical notes and things like that. And there's also, when he hugs his sister Rebecca, we're hearing heartbeat sours. Now, was that the lavaliers, or was that...
That was the Lavs.
That was the Lavs.
That was the Lavs. That was just accidental, I mean, or fortuitous.
Yeah.
But we went to Skywalker Sound out in California, which they do the Star Wars movies, and, you know, it's George Lucas's compound. So that was one of the highlights of my life in film, is to get to go there and spend several days and do the sound. They had just done Jurassic Park right before they did us, you know.
There you go. So almost Dolby here.
Yeah.
But yes, well, the audio was intense throughout, as well as the scoring. I mean, I've never heard more ominous scoring for the slicing of a turkey in my life. That was like, this is the scariest turkey I've ever seen sliced. But it came off of that image of Sasha by a sort of a computer box with the turkey carcass next to him, and he's talking about Howard, and it's just like, and it was a completely perfect fit. But so yes, the production values on it I just were kind of extreme. Now, when he went to make this, and when you went to executive produce on it, was it already tied into all the advocacy stuff? Everything had already been put together, like the kids center, the child advocacy group in Pennsylvania, and those things.
Yeah. Yes, you know, Sasha goes around. He really does speak quite a bit. He's on a speaking tour quite often, and they bring him in all over the country to do this, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, and on the subject of this and what has been is what's going on, the movement, as you would call it, almost, of trying to bring more awareness to this, to get children to speak, to get abused people, as women and children and anyone that's been abused, to be able to speak out against the threat of being killed or whatever the threat is. This is in line with another great film that was shown in Southampton. It was At the Heart of Gold, which was about the Olympic gymnasts scandal and Larry Nassar. But the upshot of these things is to take action, to get more awareness of these things going on. So your career in film, the River and the Wall, this film, other things. We're talking about causes. Is there an element of that in putting together the executive producing aspect of it?
I really just get on board things that I think are important, and I think what I took away from this is that, I didn't go through it myself, but I had children, and I will have grandchildren, and I think what's happening is that at 90% of these cases, your abuser. It could be in your family, it could be a close family friend, 90%. So I felt so naive, even raising my own kids, that I wasn't really on top of this, and that you need to be aware. And Sasha would say to you, most people never disclose. They don't ever say, there's too much shame. He thought he was dirty, disgusting, and unlovable. Those are the words he uses. He said, I thought I was dirty, disgusting, unlovable. And as a 4-year-old child, you don't know what sex is. You don't know what sexual abuse is. And so unless we start discussing this more openly, or make sure you discuss it with your children or your grandchildren and your neighbor and their little children, because a lot of people just will never say it. And the only reason he came forward to disclose is because of Rebecca. Because his sister Becca, he realized was going through, and he knew she wasn't disgusting and unlovable. And that's what made, but otherwise, I believe to this day, he would not have told anybody. And who knows what, they become drug addicts. And there's suddenly all kinds of self-loathing and abuse and really destructive behaviors that these people end up in because they don't ever get help.
Well, and the film record is so clear on that, because whether he's a gifted child and saying things, this sort of mystical things about, I've waited for you for a long time, and, meet my mother, and so forth. And then he's a gifted child in kindergarten, and then first grade he's not anymore. And then he's acting out, and you can see the acting out on film. And the act of speaking, I think this film is a mission of healing for himself, but it's also as a warning to others and to bring it out into the open. The other film, and I just reference it because it's on the same topic, this Larry Nassar abuse case with the gymnasts. And one of the things that comes out is that the sentencing judge, who I had the honor to interview, had at the sentencing let the victims speak. And there were supposed to be about 26 victims that were going to speak, and there wound up being 156 victims who spoke. And after every single one, she gave a personal statement to them, congratulating them and telling them that they could move on with their lives and what heroes and what courage they had. And that's a healing process for them, as it was for Sasha here. And the other thing that came out of it is that they do know their abusers, and they do report. And nothing happens to the reports, because adults protect adults. They don't believe it. They don't want to believe it. They don't. And the message from that film, along with this, is if something happens and you say something to someone, believe them. Say, why do you feel like this? What was the inappropriate touching? What happened? Don't brush it off, so that it can get out, because only by speaking about it do these kids have a chance to heal and have the lives they have. I mean, it's so beautiful to see what he's able to do now and the life that he has. So,
but he went through 10 years of therapy, I might add.
Oh, no,
you
of
know,
course,
and
of
his
course.
grandparents literally sold their house to afford to keep him in therapy. Like, it's not an easy fix. It's not like, okay, you're absolved, go on with your life. It's such a profound thing for these young children. They don't know how to process it, and it can take years. So.
And it never goes away 100%.
No.
You know, because some of the victims in the other movies have talked about how there was closure, and it brought them to a new stage, but it's not gone. It's never gone.
Right.
And so that kind of trauma. But films like this do an amazing job of letting people know about it. Do we have any people with questions here? Yeah.
Well, the existence of the home movies is so extraordinary that I can understand why Sasha was compelled to do something with it.
Yes, and
the fact that Henry saved all of those images, amazing. And also, I thought Dr. Lustig was incredible too.
Isn't he?
Yeah, what an incredible, the fact that he saved all of those drawings, you know.
Yeah.
Very extraordinary and fortuitous that Sasha was able to draw upon those resources. So.
Well, and that Sasha became a filmmaker himself after his father's a filmmaker on the video camera. But interestingly, at the very beginning, when Jackie mentions that he was getting a video camera when his son was being born, and then it became a block between her and her husband. It was sort of a wall with a video camera, but at the same time, it kept this record. And then his son becomes a video. Okay, we have a question right up here.
I just had a story question. I don't know if I missed it or if it didn't get revealed. Do we know who Howard's abuser was?
No, no one knows to this day. And we're really interested because this film will be very broad next year in 2020, March. It's coming out in theaters. And then it's going to be on Independent Lens on public television, May 11th. Mark your calendars. Great. So it will be national, go into millions of homes. And so we're wondering, Sasha did reach out to Temple Emmanuel when he was making the film, and he had to go through the basic channel. You go online and I guess send an email to the whoever. And it was met with crickets. I mean, nobody got back to him. Nobody seemed to care. I'm sure they were hoping that, here he's going to make a little film and no one will ever hear about it. But we would hope in a world of just worlds that they might come back and say, they raised over $2 million to keep these lawyers going. And that's back, that's several years back. So it kept those lawyers going as long as they wanted. And so we're hoping they might raise the same amount and give it toward a child advocacy center and try to prevent this from happening, because they just denied it across the board.
Well, it's shocking because it's the people you trust. It's not only people you know, it's the people you trust.
Right.
That was the case of the gymnast doctor. That's the case in the clergy cases. It's the case everywhere. Parents, friends of parents. It's people you trust, and which just makes it 50 times more confusing and ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right here. Okay.
One of the things that I was thinking was maybe in the beginning of the film might want to put some sort of a note about you could get re-traumatized again, because it's like the Kavanaugh trials and everything else. It just, at least for me, it just brought up all the stuff again. So I think it's, you've got to be very sensitive to people that are watching this. It's tough. Really tough.
And Independent Lens is very aware of that. They are going to put something that does give a warning that it can trigger, and we realize that it can. We have seen that, and Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's not easy to watch. By all means.
Insofar as Temple Emmanuel in Howard is concerned, I'm fairly familiar with that place, and I'm wondering if you could shed some insight beyond what we saw and what was just mentioned as to how they were able to make it go away, why Howard wasn't in jail, and also, who are the head rabbis there then?
See, I couldn't answer who the head rabbis are. I just know that he took the plea, which discounted the felony. But when I was talking to Sasha, the plea, even in the plea, there were things that it's basically all sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. So I find it egregious that could be considered a misdemeanor as opposed to a felony. You'd be shocked what would pass as a misdemeanor. And so that's kind of how they made it go away, and it's just they took the plea and they gave him the warning.
Yeah, but the ridiculous part of that is that he pleads to the misdemeanor, has to retire from Temple Emmanuel, and their denial is gone because he's copped to the fact that he did this, whether you call it a misdemeanor or a felony. He did do something wrong, and therefore your $2 million, forget about it. So anyway, we have to stop now. I'm really sorry. We don't have... Well, he just fast-tracked him so he didn't have to go through everything that a normal convicted, accused person would do.
He let him do it in New York.
No, it was Morgenthau.
Morgenthau. Giuliani was, his
And if you have more
sidekick.
questions for Cindy, please talk to her out there.
Come outside.